China's TikTok sashayed its way onto the global stage through catchy short-form video content. TikTok crossed 2 billion downloads globally in the first quarter of 2020, but its prospects in the United States have been turned upside down, and it's now caught up in a wave that could get it barred from doing business with Americans, a fate shared by Chinese messaging app WeChat. Prior to this, Mr. Trump had already given TikTok parent ByteDance until September 15th to finalize a sale of the app's US arm, where it has around 100 million users. US downloads of TikTok rival apps rose after news of the potential ban. That happened in India too, when TikTok was banned there last June.
They've been trying to be much more of an international brand. If they end up blocked both in India and in the US, those are two massive markets that they're essentially losing out on. And so I think that they really do end up being a big loser coming out of this.
While TikTok's woes compound, WeChat's parent, Tencent, has downplayed the business implications of the ban order. But it's seeking clarity from US authorities.
The WeChat user base in the US is actually not very high. I think it's only like 4%, 4 or 5% of the international WeChat user base. India market and Indonesia market, Thailand market are all bigger than the US market. So it's going to be causing a lot of inconvenience to the WeChat users in the US, but these are mainly Chinese, and it won't really impact the US market or the WeChat international business at large.
All in, the United States accounts for less than 2% of Tencent's global revenue, and US advertising is less than 1% of total ads revenue. Bernstein Hong Kong maintains an outperform rating on Tencent.
At the end of the day, investors should focus on the fact that Tencent has been historically been a solid compounder over the last 20 years, and I think in the next 20 years it will still continue to deliver the kind of growth and compound value.
While the executive order still needs clarity, an Apple analyst warns that global iPhone shipments could fall up to 30% this year if the WeChat app is removed from the iOS App Store globally.
WeChat it has become such an important part of our daily lives. I personally clock 5 hours on WeChat every day. I think I'm definitely not alone there. If I have to make a choice between WeChat and iPhone, I have to say that I have to go with WeChat, and I'm sure that's going to be the choice for many other Chinese out there.
American firms that rely on WeChat to operate their business in China could also find the ban detrimental.
WeChat is a super app in that it's not only messaging, but it's payments. It's very versatile. Any US business operating in China trying to sell to the Chinese consumer, often they're using WeChat. A lot of the people that I know here in Silicon Valley who are doing business with China, it's the only way that they communicate with their colleagues or with potential partners or operators in China. It's all on WeChat.
That aside, Beijing could also restrict US firms and executives from doing business in China in retaliation to Trump's executive order.
From the Chinese government perspective and business community perspective, this is really seen as an unjustified attack, and it's not one where they're going to be, offering something in return to stop this from happening. I think it's much more likely that China takes a very aggressive approach of its own. Again, I don't see anybody really truly benefiting from this.
Market watchers say the executive order could make investors reassess their stance on Chinese internet stocks.
Are these tech companies going to continue to be able to hit their targets? Do they have that same growth story anymore if they're going to be locked out of one of these big potential revenue generating markets? From a Chinese company standpoint, there's going to be a longer term question of where do they IPO? Do they continue to list in the US, or do we see more listings coming back to mainland China or to Hong Kong?
Trump's twin executive orders on TikTok and WeChat bear near similar wordings, but the details aren't very clear on what types of transactions will be barred.
This is really, really critical because in China, tech companies still rely a lot on US technologies, especially for the foundational stacks, processors, operating systems, and so on. And therefore, not getting access to that will be a pain, not only for their global expansion, but as well even for what they can do in China and the quality of their service in China.
Boston Consulting Group's strategy think tank says the uncertainty could spur a decoupling between the US and Chinese tech firms.
The short term, China might get hurt, but the likelihood or the probability that the Chinese might find something big and find their way and challenge the US lead in terms of technologies might be higher than expected.
For now, BCG Henderson Institute says the real battleground for Chinese and US tech giants is outside the United States.
I did a study with Fudan University a couple of years ago, where it was clear that for Chinese companies, it was more important to become a leader in Southeast Asia, in India. And it was understandable because these were the markets where you had the fastest growth and where you had the best cultural fit.